Here, let me help you with that. Oh, bless you, dear.
It's no trouble at all.
Fog's pretty thick this morning.
Yeah, but it's peaceful.
Ready when you are.
She never planned to stop that morning. The path by the river was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels older than time, and she was already late. The sun was just lifting itself over the trees when she saw the old woman ahead, bent low under a load that looked far too heavy for one body to bear. The bundle on the woman's back was wrapped in dull cloth and tied with rope, and with every step, it seemed to pull her closer to the ground. Most people would have passed by, offering a quick look of pity before moving on. But something about that moment made the young woman slow down. The old woman's steps were uneven, her breathing rough and shallow. She did not ask for help. She did not even look up. Yet the air around her felt thick, as if the river itself was holding its breath. The young woman felt a strange pull in her chest, a mix of worry and curiosity she could not explain. She told herself it would only take a moment, just a few steps, just enough to ease the old woman's burden. She did not know that this single choice would change the meaning of that morning forever. When she offered to help, the old woman finally lifted her eyes. They were dark and deep, like still water at night. For a heartbeat, the young woman thought she saw something move inside them, like a reflection that did not belong. Then the old woman nodded slowly, as if this answer had been expected all along. "If you wish," she said, her voice soft but heavy, carrying a weight of its own. The ropes were loosened, and the young woman slipped her arms under the load. It was crushing. Far heavier than it looked. The weight pressed into her shoulders, stealing the air from her lungs. She nearly stumbled, surprised by how strong the pull was, as if the bundle wanted to drag her down into the earth. The old woman watched closely, saying nothing. The river beside them whispered over stones, its surface smooth and dark, moving with a steady patience that made the young woman uneasy. They began to walk together. Step by step. The path narrowed, twisting closer to the riverbank. The young woman tried to make light conversation, but the old woman answered only with quiet hums or short replies. The silence grew loud. With each step, the load seemed to grow heavier, not lighter. The young woman's arms trembled, and sweat gathered at her brow. Still she did not let go. Something deep inside her refused to quit, even as her body begged her to stop. As they walked, strange thoughts crept into her mind. Memories she had not touched in years. Small choices. Moments when she had helped and moments when she had turned away. The weight on her back seemed to react to these thoughts, shifting, tightening as if it were listening. She glanced at the river, and for a brief second, she thought she saw a face forming in the ripples, watching them pass. The old woman finally spoke again. "Many walk this path," she said. "Few notice who struggles beside them." Her words were calm, but they settled heavily in the young woman's chest. She wanted to ask what she meant, but the question stuck in her throat. The forest felt closer now, the trees leaning in, their shadows long and thin. Even the birds had gone quiet. The young woman's legs began to shake. Every step burned. She wondered why the load felt alive, why it seemed to press back against her, testing her strength and her will. She wondered why the old woman showed no sign of relief, no gratitude, only a careful watchfulness, as if measuring something unseen. The river's sound grew louder, deeper, almost like a low voice humming beneath the water. At the edge of a bend in the path, the old woman stopped. The young woman nearly collapsed, catching herself just in time. "You may set it down if you wish," the old woman said gently. "No one would blame you." The words sounded kind, but there was something else beneath them, something sharp and waiting. The young woman looked at the ground, then at the river, then back at the old woman's unreadable face. Her arms screamed for rest. Her heart pounded. A single thought echoed in her mind. Why does this feel like more than just a burden? The mist from the river thickened, curling around their feet. For the first time, the young woman noticed that the old woman's reflection did not appear in the water at all. Only the load showed, dark and heavy, stretching long across the river's surface. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask who the old woman really was, to ask why the river felt like it was watching her. But before a word could escape, the old woman leaned closer and whispered something that made the young woman's blood run cold. And in that moment, with the crushing weight still on her back and the river stirring beside her, she realized this was never just an act of kindness. It was a test. And she had not yet chosen how it would end. The whisper was soft, almost gentle, but it carried a meaning that settled deep into her bones. The young woman could not repeat the words later, not clearly, only the feeling they left behind. It was the feeling of being seen completely, as if every hidden thought and quiet fear had been laid bare. Her grip tightened around the ropes without her realizing it. The load shifted again, heavier now, pressing down as though it was waiting for her next move. She tried to steady her breathing. The forest seemed to breathe with her, slow and measured, while the river continued its low, endless murmur. The old woman stepped back slightly, giving her space, yet her presence felt larger than before. Up close, the young woman noticed things she had missed earlier. The old woman's clothes were worn but clean, her hands thin but steady. Her face, though lined with age, held no weakness. There was patience there and something else, something ancient and calm. They stood like that for a long moment. The path behind them looked ordinary now, harmless, as if nothing strange had happened at all. The path ahead, however, curved out of sight, swallowed by mist and shadow. The young woman felt as if she had stepped into a story much older than herself, one that had been told many times in many ways, always ending differently. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," the young woman finally said, her voice unsteady. "I just wanted to help." The words sounded small once spoken, like they belonged to someone else. The old woman studied her carefully, eyes flicking from her face to the burden on her back, then to the river. "Help is never small," the old woman replied. "But it is never simple either." She turned toward the water, and the young woman followed her gaze. The river was darker here, slower, its surface smooth as glass. The mist curled above it, forming shapes that vanished as soon as they appeared. For a brief moment, the young woman thought she heard her name carried on the current. The old woman began to speak again, not like someone telling a secret, but like someone remembering something long forgotten. She spoke of the river as if it were alive, not just flowing water but a watcher, a keeper of balance. She spoke of travelers who had crossed its banks for generations, each carrying something unseen. Some carried grief. Some carried pride. Some carried kindness they did not even know they had. As the old woman spoke, the weight on the young woman's back seemed to change. It no longer felt like a single object but many things pressed together. Regret. Fear. Responsibility. The kind of weight that cannot be set down easily. Her arms shook, but she stayed standing. She listened, afraid that interrupting might break something fragile in the air. She remembered stories her grandmother used to tell by firelight, stories about river spirits and hidden tests, about how small choices could open doors or close them forever. She had always thought of them as just stories, warnings wrapped in mystery to teach children how to behave. Standing there now, with the river watching and the old woman speaking like a memory given form, those stories felt uncomfortably real. "Why me?" the young woman asked quietly. The question slipped out before she could stop it. She had passed strangers before. She had helped others too. Yet never like this. Never with a weight that seemed to press against her heart as much as her shoulders. The old woman smiled just a little. "The river does not choose the strongest," she said. "Or the fastest. It watches. It waits. And when the moment comes, it sees who notices." She reached out and touched the rope lightly. The contact sent a strange warmth through the young woman's body, followed by a chill that raised goosebumps along her arms. The forest shifted again. Leaves rustled without wind. Somewhere deep among the trees, a branch snapped. The young woman's senses felt sharpened, every sound louder, every movement clearer. She became aware of how tired she was, not just in her body but in her spirit, as if she had been carrying this weight long before she met the old woman. She thought about letting the load fall. About stepping away and pretending this had never happened. The old woman had said she could set it down. No one would blame her. The words echoed again, tempting and gentle. Yet something inside her resisted, a quiet stubbornness she had always carried, the same force that made her stop on the path in the first place. The river rippled suddenly, though nothing had touched it. The mist thickened, rising higher now, curling around the old woman's legs. For a moment, the young woman could not tell where the woman ended and the fog began. her outline blurred, then sharpened again as if the river itself was deciding how clearly she should be seen. Not all tests are meant to be passed, the old woman said softly. Some are meant to be faced. She stepped closer once more, her eyes locking with the young woman's. In their depths, the young woman saw the river, endless and deep, flowing through time itself. The load pulsed against her back, heavy and alive. Her knees bent under the pressure, but she did not fall. She stood there, caught between relief and fear, kindness and self-preservation. The path ahead waited. The river listened. And somewhere beneath the weight and the whispers, the young woman felt the moment stretching, pulling tighter, as if the next choice she made would echo far beyond the forest, far beyond this quiet, watching river. The old woman stepped away again, and for the first time since they met, the young woman felt truly alone. The forest did not feel empty though. It felt crowded with unseen eyes. The weight on her back shifted as if settling in, reminding her it was still there, reminding her she was not free to walk away without consequence. She adjusted her stance, feet sinking slightly into the damp earth, and focused on staying upright. The old woman began to move ahead, slow and careful, as though nothing unusual had passed between them. After a moment's hesitation, the young woman followed. Each step forward felt like stepping deeper into something she could not yet understand. The path grew narrower, edged by tall grass that brushed against her legs. The river stayed close, always within sight, always within sound, its steady flow now seeming more intentional, like a presence keeping pace with them. As they walked, the young woman's thoughts wandered despite her effort to stay present. She thought of her life before this morning. The small town she had left behind, the people who expected her to be dependable, to always say yes. She had learned early that helping others often meant carrying more than her share, and yet she had never learned how to refuse. The realization made her chest tighten. The load on her back seemed to press harder as if responding to that truth. The old woman stopped near a bend where the river widened and slowed. The water there was deep and dark, reflecting the sky like polished stone. "Do you hear it?" the old woman asked. The young woman listened. Beneath the rush of water, there was something else, a low, steady sound almost like a heartbeat. She nodded, unsure why her throat felt tight. "Many mistake the river's voice for noise," the old woman said. "But it speaks all the time." She knelt by the water's edge and dipped her fingers into the river. The surface rippled outward in perfect circles. The young woman felt a strange pull in her chest, as if those ripples were spreading inside her as well. A sudden memory rose uninvited. A time when she had walked past someone in need because she was tired, because she told herself someone else would help. The guilt of that moment had followed her quietly ever since. The weight on her back lurched and she staggered, catching herself just in time. The old woman looked up sharply, her expression unreadable. "Careful," she said, though her tone was neither warning nor comfort. "The burden listens." The words sent a chill through the young woman. She wondered how many others had stood where she stood now, carrying unseen weight along this same path. How many had chosen to drop it? How many had carried it too far? As they continued, they passed a fallen tree stretching halfway across the path. The old woman stepped over it easily. The young woman hesitated, calculating the movement, the risk. When she lifted her leg, the load shifted violently, pulling her off balance. She cried out softly, a sound swallowed by the forest. For a moment she thought she would fall, thought the river would claim her and the weight together. But she did not fall. She strained, muscles burning, breath ragged, and managed to steady herself. The old woman watched without moving, her eyes sharp, measuring. When the young woman finally cleared the tree, her arms trembled uncontrollably. Sweat ran down her back, soaking into the cloth beneath the ropes. "You could have left it," the old woman said quietly. "Many do when it becomes difficult." The young woman shook her head, though she was not sure why. Stubbornness, perhaps. Or fear of what would happen if she stopped now. The river grew louder as the path drew closer to its edge. The mist thickened again, rising higher, blurring the line between land and water. Shapes moved within it, or maybe her tired eyes imagined them. She thought she saw figures standing just beyond the fog, watching in silence, their faces hidden. Witnesses, she realized. Not judges. Just watchers. A new thought unsettled her. What if the test was not about strength at all? What if it was about understanding when help becomes harm, when carrying another's load means losing yourself? The idea frightened her more than the weight itself. She had always believed kindness was simple. This moment proved it was not. The old woman stopped once more, this time at a place where the river curved sharply, its current stronger and faster. The ground here was uneven, slick with moisture. This is as far as many go, the old woman said. Beyond this, the path asks more questions than answers. She turned to face the young woman fully, her form clearer now, more solid, yet somehow less human. The young woman swallowed hard. Her shoulders ached. Her legs felt weak. Yet beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred, a quiet awareness growing sharper by the second. She looked at the river, then at the path ahead, then back at the old woman. The weight on her back pulsed again, heavier than ever, as if urging her to choose, as if the river itself leaned in to listen. She took a single step forward. The ground shifted under her foot, loose and uncertain. The old woman's eyes widened just slightly. The river surged, water slapping against the bank with sudden force. And in that instant, suspended between falling and standing, between letting go and holding on, the young woman realized the hardest part of the test had only just begun. The step she took felt like it echoed longer than it should have, as if the ground itself remembered it. Pebbles slid beneath her foot, and for a breathless second she thought she would lose her balance. The weight on her back shifted sharply, tugging her toward the river. She leaned forward, arms locked tight around the ropes, heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. The river answered anyway. Its calm surface broke into restless movement, ripples colliding and folding into one another. The mist lifted higher, swirling thick and slow, wrapping the space around them until the forest beyond felt very far away. The young woman could no longer hear birds, no longer hear wind. There was only the river now, louder and closer, like a presence stepping forward. The old woman moved to stand beside her. Up close, the change was impossible to ignore. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long across the damp ground, bending toward the water. Her eyes reflected the river's movement, not the sky above. "Once you reach this place," she said, "turning back is never simple." Her voice carried over the water without effort, steady and deep. The young woman's muscles burned. Her breath came in short pulls. She wanted to ask what would happen next, but fear held her silent. She could feel the weight reacting to her hesitation, tightening its hold as if it sensed doubt. It was no longer just heavy. It was demanding. She looked down at the river again, and this time she did not imagine the shapes beneath the surface. They were there. Faces formed and faded in the dark water, not frightening, not kind, simply watching. She felt an odd connection to them, as though they carried pieces of her own past. Every time she had helped when it was hard. Every time she had stayed silent when she should have spoken. The river held it all. The ground trembled faintly beneath her feet. Not enough to knock her down, but enough to warn her. The old woman lifted one hand, and the movement of the river slowed, as if responding to her gesture. "This is where many realize the truth," she said quietly. "That kindness without understanding can become another kind of burden." Those words struck harder than the weight itself. The young woman's mind raced. Had she been helping to ease suffering, or had she been avoiding her own fear of saying no? The question wrapped around her thoughts, tightening like the rope on her shoulders. The load pulsed again, heavier, forcing a sharp cry from her chest before she could stop it. She dropped to one knee, fingers digging into the damp soil. The river surged, water slapping violently against the bank. The mist swirled faster now, brushing her face, cold and wet. The old woman did not rush to her side. She only watched, eyes bright with something like expectation. The young woman struggled to rise. Every part of her shook. The temptation to let the load fall was overwhelming. Just one motion. Just a release. The river's sound seemed to soften at the thought, almost encouraging. She wondered if that was how others had felt, right before they gave in. Her hands loosened on the rope without her meaning to. The weight shifted dangerously. Her heart hammered. She clenched her jaw and pulled her hands back into place, knuckles white. "I'm still here," she whispered, unsure who she was speaking to. The river answered with a deep, rolling sound that vibrated through her chest. The old woman stepped closer, close enough that the young woman could feel the air change around her. The lines on her face seemed deeper now, her presence larger, as if she were more than one being standing in one place. "The river does not demand sacrifice," she said. "It demands honesty." A sudden gust of cold air rushed over the water, lifting the mist high enough to reveal something beneath the surface. The young woman gasped. For a brief, terrible moment, she saw the river's depth not as water, but as a vast moving force, endless and aware. She felt very small before it, and yet strangely important, like a single note in a long song. The weight on her back grew unbearable. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her legs buckled again, and this time she fell forward onto both knees. The rope cut into her shoulders. Pain flared sharp and real. Tears filled her eyes, not just from the strain, but from the fear that she might fail, that whatever this test was, she might not be enough. The river surged violently, waves crashing against the bank, soaking the ground around her. The old woman raised her arms, and the water stilled just enough to keep from spilling over. "Now," she said, her voice carrying over everything else, "the river is listening." The young woman lifted her head slowly. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. Her chest heaved. She looked at the old woman, then at the river, then at the load that had become part of her. The mist closed in again, thick and heavy, hiding the path behind her completely. The air felt tight, charged, as if the world itself leaned closer. Every sound faded except the pounding of her heart and the low, waiting hum of the river. And there, on her knees at the edge of the water, with the crushing load still bound to her back, she realized that whatever choice she made next would not only decide the weight she carried, but who she would be when she stood again. The traveler's foot hovered above the ground, frozen mid-step, as if the river itself had reached out and held them there. The young woman felt the moment tighten around all three of them like a drawn breath that refused to release. The load on her back throbbed again, sharper this time, and she realized with sudden clarity that it was responding not just to her thoughts, but to the presence of the other person. "No," she whispered without thinking. The word slipped out raw and instinctive. She didn't know who she was speaking to, the traveler, the old woman, or the river, but the plea was real. The ropes burned against her skin as the burden shifted, pulling toward the newcomer like iron toward a magnet. The old woman turned slowly, her gaze settling on the traveler. Her face softened in a way that unsettled the young woman more than the river's fury. "You see," she said gently, "the weight seeks another set of shoulders. It always does." Her eyes flicked back to the young woman. "This is where the test deepens." The river surged again and the spiral widened, drawing mist and water inward. The reflection in the river rose higher, clearer now, a tall shape made of shadow and moving light. It did not step out of the water, but its presence pressed against the air, heavy and undeniable. The young woman felt it watching both of them, not with anger but with patient expectation. The traveler finally spoke, their voice trembling. "What's happening?" They took another step forward despite themselves, eyes locked on the young woman and the burden she carried. "Do you need help?" The words hit her like a blow. Help. The very word that had brought her here now threatened to pull someone else into the same trap. The load pulsed violently, as if excited, as if recognizing an opportunity. She cried out as pain shot through her shoulders, deeper now, sharper, as though something inside her was tearing open. The old woman raised a hand, and the river stilled just enough for her voice to carry. "Be careful," she warned the traveler. "Kindness without awareness can become a chain." The traveler hesitated, fear and concern warring across their face. The young woman locked eyes with them, and in that instant she saw herself reflected back, uncertain, well-meaning, unprepared for the cost. A surge of panic rose in her chest. She shook her head hard. "Don't come closer," she said louder now. "Please." The load reacted to her refusal with sudden force. The ropes tightened, biting into her shoulders so sharply she gasped. The bundle writhed, no longer pretending to be still. The cloth darkened further, damp spreading outward like ink in water. She felt a presence inside it shift, impatient, pressing toward release. The river spirit's shape leaned forward, its outline rippling. The water climbed higher along the bank, soaking the ground beneath her knees. Cold seeped into her skin, grounding her even as fear threatened to pull her apart. She realized then that the burden was not only made of promises, it was made of choices avoided, passed along, left for someone else to carry. "You're resisting," the old woman said, her voice layered and echoing now. "That changes things." The young woman looked up sharply. "I don't want anyone else to carry this," she said, her voice breaking. "That has to matter." For the first time, uncertainty crossed the old woman's face. Just a flicker. Just enough. The river responded with a low, resonant sound that rolled through the forest like distant thunder. The watching traveler flinched, taking a step back as the mist surged between them. The load pulsed again, then did something unexpected. The pressure eased just slightly. Enough for the young woman to draw a deeper breath. Her heart raced as realization dawned. The burden was testing her not just for endurance but for restraint. For the courage to stop the cycle instead of continuing it. But the river was not finished. The reflection in the water shifted, splitting briefly into multiple shapes, figures standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the surface. The young woman felt their presence like a chorus of memories not her own. People who had carried the burden before. People who had passed it on. The weight surged again, heavier than ever, as if angered by her resistance. The traveler cried out as the ground beneath them trembled. A crack split the damp earth near the riverbank, water rushing to fill it. Panic flared in their eyes. "What do I do?" they shouted. The young woman clenched her teeth, every muscle screaming. She looked at the old woman, at the river spirit's rising form, at the traveler caught at the edge of a choice they didn't even understand yet. The air felt electric, charged with something close to breaking. "You decide," the old woman said, her voice quieter now, almost strained. "Right now." The mist swirled violently, hiding the path completely. The river surged higher, waves crashing close enough to soak her hands. The load tightened one last time, heavier than ever, as if demanding an answer. The young woman's vision blurred, but her focus sharpened. She realized the twist she had not seen coming. The test was no longer only about carrying or letting go. It was about whether she would claim the burden as her responsibility to confront, or surrender it to the river's endless cycle. The traveler took another step forward despite her warning. The river roared. And with the weight crushing her down and the next choice seconds away from being forced, the young woman knew the moment of decision was no longer approaching. It was already here, pressing in from every side, waiting to see whether the chain would finally break, or tighten forever. The moment the burden dissolved, the young woman thought it was finished. The air felt lighter, her shoulders free, her breath steady for the first time in what felt like hours. The river lay calm, reflecting the sky like a sheet of dark glass, and the forest seemed to exhale around her. For a heartbeat, peace settled in her chest. Then the river spoke again. Not with force this time, but with clarity. "You have ended the cycle," the voice said, rising gently from the water, neither loud nor soft but impossible to ignore. The surface of the river began to glow faintly, light moving beneath it like slow currents of stars. The young woman stepped back instinctively, heart racing as the water lifted, not spilling, not surging, but shaping itself. The river spirit emerged fully for the first time. It did not look like a monster. It did not look kind either. It looked ancient and human, formed of flowing water and light, its face shifting subtly, carrying traces of many lives. The young woman felt its presence deep in her chest, like standing before something that knew her better than she knew herself. "You chose honesty," the spirit said. "You chose not to pass the weight. That is why the burden is gone." Relief washed through her, but it did not last. "Then why does it still feel unfinished?" she asked, her voice steady but wary. The river spirit regarded her for a long moment. The forest went silent again, waiting. "Because the burden was never the true test," it replied. The young woman's breath caught. The spirit raised one fluid hand, and the river's surface shifted like a mirror turning inward. Images appeared, people from long ago standing where she had stood. Some had carried the burden and passed it on. Some had dropped it and walked away. A few had done what she did and stopped it. But all of them shared one thing. They had returned. "The river does not test once," the spirit continued. "It watches who learns and who forgets." The young woman felt a chill that had nothing to do with cold. "What are you saying?" The water rippled again and the image changed. She saw herself, not as she was now but older, standing by the same river, watching someone struggle beneath a weight. The realization hit her like a sudden drop. "You're saying?" Her voice trailed off. The spirit nodded slowly. "Every ending creates a guardian. Someone who remembers." Her knees weakened and she sank back onto the damp ground. "I don't want that," she whispered. "I just wanted to help. I wanted to go home." "You can," the river spirit said. "But knowledge carry changes a person. You will notice the burdens others carry. You will feel the pull to stop. That choice will return again and again." The forest seemed closer now, the path clearer, as if inviting her forward. She looked toward it, imagining herself walking away, living as she had before. The thought felt distant. Not impossible, but incomplete. The river spirit began to sink back into the water, its form dissolving into light. "The final truth," it said, its voice fading into the flow, "is that the greatest test is not the river. It is what you do after you leave it." The glow vanished. The river returned to its natural state, quiet and ordinary once more. The young woman stood slowly. Her body was tired, but her mind felt sharp, awake in a way it had never been before. She looked down at her empty hands, half expecting the ropes to still be there. They were gone. The burden was gone. But the awareness remained. As she stepped onto the path and walked away, the forest opened around her, sunlight filtering through the trees. Each step felt real, grounded, free. Yet with every step she sensed something else, a quiet connection trailing behind her, like the river's current moving just out of sight. Far behind her the river flowed on. And as another figure approached its banks from the opposite direction, the water stirred, not in hunger, not in anger, but in recognition. The cycle was broken. But the watching had only just begun. The river roared one last time, loud enough to shake the ground beneath them, and then it stopped. Not slowly. Not gently. It stopped as if someone had closed a door. The sudden silence pressed against the young woman's ears, making her dizzy. The mist froze in place, hanging in the air like a held breath. Even the weight on her back went still. She closed her eyes. For the first time since she had knelt by the riverbank, she stopped fighting the burden. She did not tighten her grip. She did not try to stand or collapse. She simply stayed where she was and spoke the truth she had been avoiding. "I can't carry this anymore," she said softly. Her voice did not shake this time. "And I won't give it to someone else." The words felt different the moment they left her mouth. Honest. Complete. The load reacted immediately. Instead of tightening, it loosened. The ropes slackened against her shoulders, slipping just enough for her to breathe freely. A warmth spread through her chest, slow and steady, easing the pain that had built there for so long. The river stirred, not in anger, but in recognition. The reflection in the water shifted again, the tall shadow breaking apart into ripples of light and dark. Faces beneath the surface faded one by one, their watchful presence finally at rest. The water level dropped back into its banks, leaving the ground wet but stable. The forest seemed to lean back, releasing the tension it had been holding. The old woman let out a long breath. For the first time she looked truly tired. "It has been a long time," she said quietly. Her voice sounded human again, no longer layered or echoing. She stepped away from the river, and this time her reflection followed her movement perfectly. Very few choose to stop the burden instead of passing it on. The traveler stared in disbelief as the bundle on the young woman's back began to change. The dark cloth lightened, thinning like fog under sunlight. The weight lifted slowly, gently, until it no longer pressed at all. The ropes slid down her arms and fell to the ground, empty. The young woman remained on her knees for a moment longer, stunned by the sudden absence. Her shoulders ached, but the pain was fading fast. She placed her hands on the earth to steady herself, feeling the cool soil beneath her palms. When she finally stood, her legs shook, not from strain this time but from release. The bundle dissolved completely, breaking apart into mist that drifted toward the river and vanished into the water without a sound. The traveler rushed forward instinctively, then stopped short, unsure. "Is it over?" they asked. The young woman nodded slowly. "For me," she said. She met the traveler's eyes, really seeing them now. "And it doesn't have to begin again." The old woman smiled then, a small, genuine smile that softened the years from her face. "The river tests kindness," she said, "but it also honors wisdom." She turned toward the water one last time. The river shimmered in response, sunlight breaking through the thinning mist. Balance is restored when someone chooses truth over habit. As she stepped closer to the river, her form began to blur at the edges, not in a frightening way, but like mist returning to morning air. "Remember," she added, looking back at the young woman, "helping does not mean losing yourself. And carrying everything is not the same as caring." With that, she faded into the river's reflection, her presence dissolving into gentle ripples that spread outward and disappeared. The forest felt different after that. Lighter. Brighter. Birds began to sing again, hesitant at first, then bold. The path behind them reappeared clearly, solid and familiar. The traveler exhaled shakily. "I didn't understand any of it," they admitted. "But I think I will remember this." The young woman smiled faintly. "That's enough." They parted ways soon after, each taking a different direction along the path. The young woman lingered by the river a moment longer, watching the water flow peacefully now. It looked ordinary again, just a river winding through trees. But she knew better. As she walked away, her steps felt lighter, more certain. She understood now that kindness was not about how much weight you could carry, but about knowing when to set it down, and when to refuse to pass it on. The river did not need endless sacrifice. It needed awareness. Behind her, the water flowed on, quiet and patient, waiting, not for the next burden, but for the next person willing to listen.